Disclaimer: the following story is a creative interpretation of unofficial lore and has no connections to real places or people. Any places that appear are merely coincidental. Also, no straw bunnies or bun buds were harmed in the making of the story. Thank you ahead of time and enjoy the show. 10 lunar siblings circled the sun. The first, a quick moon, whose final orbit will never complete. The second, an aged moon, whose peaceful slumber carries on into eternity. The third, a wary moon. Through cautious eyes he fails to notice the end. The fourth, a resourceful moon, succumbs to gluttony and consumes his final ration. The fifth, a pious moon, whose praise for the sun will leave him frozen in the abyss. The sixth, a loyal moon, whose silence seals the fate of his kin. The seventh, a healing moon, whose final prescription diagnoses the end. The eighth, a bygone moon, whose sins of the past lap him. The ninth, a prideful moon, who arrogantly challenges the sun only to be burnt away. The 10th, a cognizant moon. He speaks the truth to a silent audience. 10 lunar siblings circled the sun. Prologue. At the top of the northern sea lies a snowy land of tranquil beauty and silent production. This humble nation is known throughout the Stellarverse as Usachi-stan. The denizens of Usachi-stan all lead quiet lives as they go about their day, overseen by their sovereign, Usachi Yui, who emerged as a revolutionary and a great leader during the reign of the evil tyrant Lord Celery. She would lead a small group of insurgents to slowly yet effectively topple the old regime and take a hold of the country. Since then, she has ruled as its supreme leader and enacted many a great reform to the country, bringing it to the high standing it has today. What's that? What does this information have to do with the story? That's a great question. I'm not really sure. Anywhoodles, this story takes place during the second year of our great leader's rule, and starts in quite a few number of places. Chapter 1, Section 1. The soft click-clack of the train wheels running over the welded gaps in the rails filled the air on a cool Thursday night. Sundown Strawthorn had been staring out the window for some time, going over the letter he had received a month ago from a friend of his.
Dear Mr. Strawthorn, I hope that this letter finds you and your family in good health, and that you may spare a few minutes to read over this letter. I have recently acquired some property in the far north that simply has the most phenomenal view of the capital and the snow-capped Strawberry Mountains, and wish to invite you up here to reminisce about old times as we catch up. On the 15th of February, take the northbound Usachi Express up to the Seabunnies Central Station, where you'll find a driver waiting to take you up here. I look forward to seeing you soon. Sincerely, your older sister, Countess Seabunnies. How many years has it been?
Click-clack, click-clack. There was still quite a ways to go before he would reach his destination, and it was already getting quite late. Slowly and peacefully, Strawthorn drifted off to sleep, as soft sounds of the train lulled him into the land of dreams. Section 2. It was a beautiful sunny day, and Chunya was resting underneath a pine tree, catching her breath from the 5-mile hike she had just finished making. It was cool but comfortable weather, and snow powdered the ground throughout the mountain. Miss Bonini lived out in the mountains in a small remote village that only had one road in and out for deliveries, and for the few wealthy retirees who could afford to drive around. Everyone else in her village walked wherever they needed to go, and since it was a generally active community, there were plenty of trails to go out in the surrounding area. A few weeks ago, the latest batch of mail was delivered, and in it was a letter addressed to Miss Bonini from a colleague of hers that lived in the capital. It read,
Hello, Bonini. How's life been out in the sticks? I'm still kind of jealous you got assigned one of the best spots for stargazing while I'm stuck here crunching numbers and writing reports. But I guess that's what happened when you drop out. Anyways, I'm writing to you now because the annual Usachi National Science Conference is coming up, and I was hoping you'd join me. It's being held on the 16th of February at this huge estate with this gorgeous view of the capital. I hope to see you there. You can take the S1 Usachi line to get to Seabunnies Central Station, where I'll have someone there to pick you up. From your sister, from another mister. Yicheta and Owen.
Bonini smiled as she remembered the eccentric personality of her friend before she got up and started to trek down the other side of the mountain to the train station. At the pace that she was going, she would be able to catch the final train departing the station. Section 3. A myriad array of sights and sounds flooded Kaz Strakowski's senses as he woke up and looked out the window. He shuffled over to the bathroom and brushed his teeth sleepily. It had been a pretty slow month at work, and so he had fallen back into his old habit of sleeping in until whenever his body told him to get up. But he still got whatever work that was available done in time to keep fueling this habit. He looked over the counter where an open envelope lay, and he recounted the contents of that letter in his mind as he finished his morning routine and got dressed.
Greetings, Mr. Strakowski. It's been a few years, but we had a few classes together, and I was wondering if you would be willing to participate in a research project of mine. Of course, you will be compensated for your time and all expenses will be paid. I've been running a little low on participants in my area and was hoping you'd be able to help out. The experiment will take place on February 16th and will be measuring if bonds can be formed between people more quickly in an environment that is of high status and wealth. In this envelope, you'll find a ticket for the westbound Usachi Express, and I will arrange for a chauffeur to pick you up from the Seabunnies Central Station, where you will be driven up to the estate that this experiment will take place in. Thank you for your time and understanding. Sincerely, Gunther Norman.
Strakowski finished getting dressed and set out to the westbound station to catch the afternoon train. Although he was a bit skeptical about the details, he had remembered Gunther from his doctorate cohort, and although Gunther was a bit eccentric, he always found a way to conduct the most efficient and interesting experiments. Section 4. The bell tolled 3 times, signaling the end of communion, as a scrawny strawberry walked off the stage and left the church. Strauchan Freddles was a man of zeal and faith, who would often give sermons preaching the word of Yuism to his fellow countrymen, and today was no different. He smiled as he bid farewell to the church members, and set out to his car, where he rested for a moment to recount his sermon and review the reactions of the church members. He started his car and began driving home. After his commute home, he cleaned up and got dressed once more as he reread a letter that he had gotten a month prior from an old minister friend of his. Greetings, Reverend Strauchan. I was reviewing some old sermons when I came across a transcript of one of our collaboration services, where you delivered one of the most inspiring speeches I've ever heard. I was recently invited to Benedict, a newly purchased estate that overlooks the capital of Seabunnies, and I was hoping that you could join me to deliver that closing speech, as well as just to catch up on life. On the 16th of February, you can take the southbound Usachi Express to Seabunnies Central Station, where a taxi has been arranged to pick you up along with a few other guests. Many thanks ahead of time. Your former student, Jonathan Onwell. Strauchan smiled as he remembered his time in the Central Church teaching up and coming ministers on the art of preaching as he hopped back into his car and began the drive to the nearest station. Section 5. In the golden rays of sunrise, Sir Foxy Unilicus Crown Goldenbud Esquire III rose from his bed and immediately began the day by scolding his maid for putting his breakfast on the left side of the bed instead of the right. He sleepily ate his breakfast as he watched the news, after which he would relax in a pre-drawn bath and would finally shower and get dressed. He returned to his room where he read through a letter stamped with the royal crest of Usachi stamp once more.
Greetings and salutations, son. I have heard news that a trading partner and old friend from the Great War has recently purchased an impressive estate overlooking the capital. However, I am currently tied up in some extremely important trade negotiations, and as such, I ask that you go in my place to attend the housewarming ceremony. Please leave on the 16th of February and have one of the drivers take you to the city hall, where my friend will have a chauffeur waiting to take you to the estate. Sincerely, Grand Duke Unovich Goldenbun.
Unilicus sighed in minor annoyance and begrudgingly called for a driver to take him to City Hall. Section 6. Bunlock Watcher was leaving the police station after a long day at work and stopped by the local diner, where he ordered his usual: a hamburger, small fries, and a legally distinct soft drink. The server, who moved with practiced ease to the same spot he always sat down at, and set down a letter.
Who's this from?
Oh, one of our regulars left it here with the instructions to deliver it to you when you came in, the server answered. Bunlock began eating as he opened the letter and started reading.
Dear Mr. Watcher, information from HQ has hinted at the possibility of a Bunbud leader making a public appearance for the first time in over a decade. You have been assigned the task of attending a housewarming ceremony at the Unich Norman estate to monitor and detail the activities of Ulivian Bunner. Enclosed in this envelope you will find a ticket for the northeast-bound Usachi Express, where you must get on the 5 o'clock train on February 16th. This mission is of utmost importance, and if you succeed, we will have a promotion waiting for you. Best of luck, Onsa Nadovitsky Owenovich.
Bunlock nearly dropped his burger, but caught it before it slipped out of his hand. Unfortunately, the same could not be said for his fries. He quickly scarfed down his meal and left in a hurry to prepare for his upcoming mission. Section 7. Isaac Bunnington roared down the empty mountain road in the wee hours of the morning. The cool, crisp morning air rushed past his hair as he passed sleepy commuter after sleepy commuter.
I read that the drivers here were pretty slow, but from what I've seen, you can hardly call them drivers. They're more like standing walls of stale bread, placed there just to get in my way.
As he continued onward, he went over the letter he had received a few weeks prior that started his current escapade.
Hey there, Bunnington. It's been a while, hasn't it, buddy? I recently decided to do some sweepstakes for the hell of it and won myself a week-long vacation, starting on the 16th of February, at this new state opening up. Unfortunately, my mother caught this absolute horrendous flu. They got her bedridden, so I won't be able to go. I decided to roll the dice and flip my address book to the Nurbury Road, and lo and behold, your name was on the top of the list. Lucky you, although that's almost your motto. So, since fate willed it, I'd sent you my ticket along with the name of the person you need to meet at Strobania Central Station to redeem it. Have enough fun for the both of us, Stronophan Berry. Oh boy, gotta get him some pilk.
Yazak grinned as he remembered his old gambling partner and continued onwards to Strabania Central Station. Section 8. The stale air and the lingering scent of cigars filled Ulivian Bunner's nostrils as he aroused from his slumber and took in the unfamiliar surroundings of the train carriage. He looked out the window towards the capital, and he remembered the old days of the old regime. He cautiously removed a small paper from his coat pocket and read its contents once again.
Comrade Bunner, it has been many years since you have retired, and I respect your decision. However, a new estate has opened overlooking the capital of those heretics and will require your expertise in surveillance and reconnaissance. We have arranged a travel permit for you, as well as a train ticket that will take you to a local branch station near the estate where some of our comrades will escort you. We understand that you have left your previous life behind, and as such, although your expertise would be greatly appreciated, we'd be more than grateful enough if you simply show up. We have some intel leaked from the Usachi Stand's secret police that they are aware of your presence near Strabania, and we suspect that they will send an agent there to monitor you. For this reason, we ask that you simply show up and distract those dastardly straw bunnies, so that our comrades can move around Strabania with greater ease. Thank you and Godspeed. Benedict Budsworth.
Bunner sighed heavily as he hid away the letter once more and took out his travel permit and ticket as the conductor came around. Chapter 2, Section 1. Outside Strawbania Central Station, a group of straw bunnies stood patiently holding suitcases and small envelopes. A couple of luxurious black taxis pulled in front of the group as the chauffeurs got out and asked, "Are you all here for the Unich estate?" All 6 straw bunnies voiced confirmation almost in perfect unison, before quickly turning their heads to look at one another with surprised and wary looks. An awkward series of exchanges and small greetings were made before the group split into 2 and handed their luggage to the chauffeurs to pack into the trunk. "We have 2 more guests who will be arriving via their own drivers, whom we will meet at the estate." The chauffeurs entered their respective cars and began driving away from the city. For a couple of hours, all that could be seen out the window of the car was the dense wilderness. Finally, they came upon a snow-dusted driveway where a grandiose gate opened up to welcome the guests. A short winding road led up to the magnificent estate that overlooked the shining capital in the far distance, with a breathtaking backdrop of the Strawberry Mountain. One by one, the guests were led into the manor, as 2 more cars arrived. Out of one stepped a blond, noble-looking fellow, whose arrogance could be felt even at a distance. From the other stepped out an old fellow, who had an air of authority around him, which contrasted his slightly hunched and almost frail-looking stature. After dropping off the guests' luggage at the door and notifying the servants of the party's arrival, the chauffeurs bid everyone farewell and began the drive back home. A few moments later, the grand doors opened as the 2 butlers greeted the guests. Section 2. Fibonacci Stronican was a dignified man who radiated a sense of professionalism and had a certain gravity about him that ensured the guests of his expertise. He led the guests into the main hall, as a table lined with drinks and snacks flanked both sides of the group. From there, he led each of the guests to their rooms while carrying their luggage. Each room was a splendid display of wealth and comfort, which further reassured the guests of the status of their host. One by one, the guests split off into their respective rooms to unpack, while Stronican headed for the kitchen to check on preparations for dinner. In the kitchen, the second butler, Kenryo Benedict, was fervently working to plate all of the meals in an appetizing manner before transferring them to the serving cart for Stronican to bring to the dining hall. Benedict was a young butler who was still inexperienced in the ways of serving guests. However, what he lacked in hospitality experience, he made up for in cooking ability, as a master-class chef who expertly balanced inspiration with flavor to create dishes that not only satisfied the eyes, but the stomach as well. It was for this reason that he usually spent most of his time in the kitchen, as opposed to interacting with the guests whenever he had been hired to serve in manors in the past. The enticing aroma of dinner wafted up through the hall and into the second floor before a gong from the dining hall sounded, signaling the completion of dinner preparation. The guests exited the rooms and walked down the stairs into the dining hall, where they took their seats and began to make idle chatter and mingle with one another, as Stronican brought in the drinks and then brought everyone to their attention.
Welcome to the Uinic estate, everyone. I am the head butler of this manor, Fibonacci Stronican, and I will be acting as the host this evening. Please direct your attention to the plates in front of you, as our chef and my underservant introduces you to tonight's dish.
Hello, everyone. I am the head chef of this manor, and it is my pleasure to serve you all tonight. My name is Kenryo Benedict, and tonight's dish is a filet mignon with a side of truffle fries. I would also like to draw attention to our selection of drinks that we have chosen to complement your palate as you enjoy this wonderful dinner.
The guests each selected their choice of drink and began to dine as Stronican and Benedict made their rounds, refilling drinks and serving snacks. Each guest naturally began to converse with one another, and the dining hall was soon filled with the sounds of drinks clinking together and chatter. Section 3. Dinner began to come to a close as Stronican and Benedict collected the empty plates on their serving carts and headed back to the kitchen.
This place is pretty neat. It got quite a view and all the drinks you could ever need. I'm curious how the master of this manor managed to get his hand in such a hidden gem. I'd love to ask him directly, but it seems he's letting the whole thing bake.
Isaac popped open another bottle of champagne and poured himself another drink. The others followed suit and began refilling their drinks. Isaac then settled back into his chair, when suddenly a faint static sound could be heard. Isaac was the first to notice, but as the noise grew louder, the others started picking up on it one by one, and a silence soon fell over the room. As soon as the room had gone quiet, the sound of a tape started to ring throughout the hall, and a disembodied voice began to speak.
Greetings, greetings, everyone! It's wonderful having such a crowd gather here today.
Everyone began looking around for the source of the voice, but to no avail.
We have quite a diverse cast of characters here, wouldn't you say? It's great to meet new people through the wonders of coincidence, wouldn't you say?
An awkward silence filled the room as a growing sense of unease began to creep into everyone's hearts.
Aw, come on now. Let's try to be a little excited at hearing what very well could be the voice of God. Not very fond of that joke. That's a shame. Well, there are many beautiful and mysterious happenstances that lead us along our journey through life. Or so we'd like to believe. However, if there's one thing I can assure you, it would be that tonight's group is not here by mere coincidence.
Everyone turned to look at one another with the same puzzled expression, as they tried to figure out what this person was trying to get at.
What I mean to say is that although we have quite a variety of Seabunnies here, you're all connected by one single fact. Each and every one of you is guilty of an uncleansable sin.
At once the room flared up as shouts of confusion and anger were directed to where the voice was seemingly coming from.
As of right now, I'm charging you with the following crimes. Kaz Stravowski, that you did upon the 17th of July caused the death of Unther Norman. Sundown Strawthorn, that you did upon the 3rd of February caused the death of Countess Strabenicus. Bunlock Watcher, that you caused the death of Unser Nanovitsky Ovinovich on the 27th of January. Chunyo Benini, that on the 21st of March you brought upon the death of Yuketa Enna Owen. Isaac Bunnington, that you did upon the 31st of September caused the death of Stronathan Barry. Strachan Freddles, that on the 15th of May you brought upon the death of Bunnathan Onwell. Olivia Bunner, that upon the 7th of August you caused the death of Benedict Budsworth. Sir Foxy Unilicus Goldenbun Esquire III, that upon the 23rd of April you brought upon the death of Grandic Yunovich Goldenbun. Kenru Benedict and Fibonacci Stronican, that on the 9th of June you brought upon the death of Unich Norman. For the crime of defiling the sanctity of life, you shall remember and repent until the day of reckoning arrives.
As suddenly as the voice had arrived, it disappeared into the crushing silence of the room. Section 4. A few minutes of silence passed as a grim atmosphere settled into the room. Everyone silently began judging each other before they collectively, internally decided to begin searching the room for the source of the voice. They looked under the table and at the ceiling. They inspected the walls, but to no avail. Finally, Isaac called out,
Everyone, over here!
He lifted the rug to reveal a trap door in the floor, and without second thought, he opened it up and jumped in. One by one, the others followed suit. Underneath the floorboards was a wide open area with a cassette player hooked up to an elaborate set of wires leading to speakers set around the room. After inspecting the underground space, the group ascended back to the dining hall and found their own spot to occupy as an uneasy silence settled down into the room. Isaac headed off to the bar and refilled his glass as he swept his gaze across the room.
Jeez, you're all acting like someone just told your grandma died or something. Relax. I'm sure this was some childish prank one of the butlers cooked up to get a rise out of us. They're the only ones I can think of who'd bother with something this elaborate. It's probably some unresolved anger towards people more fortunate than them.
Isaac said brightly with a wide grin as he downed his drink. After hearing Isaac's logic, everyone slowly returned to their senses and agreed with the obvious rationale given to them. Upon this general agreement, they decided to head to the kitchen to confront the pair of butlers. They briskly walked towards the kitchen with a determination to get answers and an apology for tarnishing their reputation with such baseless accusations. But when they arrived at the kitchen, they found it entirely devoid of human presence, and a piece of paper was on the counter. Isaac approached the counter and picked up the paper before he began to read it to himself. As he read it, the others tried to group around him, but he slowly backed up and read further. The group began to notice him breaking into a cold sweat as the color drained slowly from his face, and his normal carefree expression was twisting into one of fear and anger.
No. How did they even find this? What a rotten, vile prank this has become if they're stooping this low to make their tapes ingenuine.
What are you prattling on about? Quit being such a hog and let us see what excuse these mongrels have written down for us to swallow.
Isaac seemed to have reached the end, and what remained was an almost inhuman expression of hatred.
Where are those useless butlers? I've had enough of this assassination of my pride and character. The first one I find is going to be lucky if he doesn't come out of this burnt crisp.
He dashed out the room, holding the paper, as the others shouted out to him and began running after him. Section 5. A foot chase ensued, and Isaac ran around the manor, while the others who could keep up with him followed closely behind. Room after room, he threw open the doors and scanned them before running off to the next while cursing under his breath. He turned another corner into a hallway, and his footsteps suddenly disappeared. Watcher was the first to make it around the corner, and he froze. Strawthorn was the second to arrive, and just as Watcher had done, he too froze. Finally, the rest of the group had caught up, and looked where the other two were staring. At the end of the hallway, Isaac laid on the ground as if he had tripped, but he seemed to be making no effort to get back up. Chun Yao broke off of the group and approached him. She slowly shook Isaac, but got no response. She immediately sensed that something was off and rolled him over. Isaac's eyes had no glint in them, and his grip on the paper was completely loose. Chun Yao took his pulse, and with a small noise of surprise, she quickly began administering CPR. It was now that everyone rushed over to see what was going on, and after a few exhausting minutes, Chun Yao shook her head with a grim look on her face.
I'm sorry, everyone. It looks like we're too late.
How's that even possible? He was running around quite fine just a moment ago. I only lost sight of him for 30 seconds at most.
She then rolled up his sleeve and gasped slightly.
Everyone come! Look at this!
Everyone gathered around to see what Chun Yao was pointing out, but didn't notice anything off.
His skin is completely pale. Well, this is normal for a dead person. It shouldn't be this pale this soon after his death.
Quit beating around the bush and just tell us directly. You're wasting my time and I could be off doing better things like getting ready for bed. This mongrel was clearly too weak to try running an Olympic dash and died as a result.
Do not make light of the tragedy that we have just bore witness to. While death is an inevitability, it still pains me to see one in the height of life wither away so suddenly. If you wish to go to bed, you are more than welcome to, but do not sully this man's final moments.
Who gave you the right to speak to me, dog of the church? But fine. I suppose as the future king of this land, I will show sympathy for this mongrel's death and stay silent until my curiosity about the paper has been quelled.
What I'm trying to say is that this was most likely the work of a poison that had a delayed effect on him.
Everyone looks at one another and then back to Chun Yao.
Unfortunately, I don't have the right tools at my disposal to really determine what poison was used. But if I had to guess, maybe one of the cyanides?
Freddles walks over to the body and rests his hand on Isaac's face before muttering a small prayer. Our great and glorious leader, please see this Strawbunny's soul off to a place where he may rest for eternity. Freddles, Kaz, and Strawthorn pick up Isaac's body and bring him to a nearby room, where they cover him with a sheet and lay him to rest, while everyone else's attention shifts to their departed Straw Bunny comrade. Watcher notices the piece of paper that Isaac had been reading and picks it up. It seems to be an old newspaper clipping about a homicide case that happened a few years ago at a casino, with the main suspect being identified as Isaac. He notices the presence of someone behind him and jumps back a little when he notices Olivian Bunner reading the newspaper clip over his shoulder.
Hey there, Bunner. I'd really appreciate it if you didn't sneak up on me, please.
I remember that case. How hypocritical that the Straw Bunnies like to preach about their love, peace, and low crime rates, yet they turn around and kill their brethren because of a bad poker hand.
You can't judge an entire population based on one incident. Plus, I remember this case as well. A friend of mine was working on it directly, but there was no concrete evidence that he actually did it. There was some circumstantial evidence that made him look guilty, but in the end, they couldn't make an arrest.
How pitiful that even one such as yourself isn't privy to all the details. It's just like you Straw Bunnies to think that you know everything, and to be so naive as to believe in anything their superior officer tells them. Tell me, Bunlock, was it that there wasn't enough evidence, or that they couldn't find enough evidence?
Well, as I just said, they didn't find enough evidence. What difference does it make?
If you can't answer that question on your own, then can you really call yourself a detective of justice?
Who said I was a detective? I work in the Usachi Stan International Airport, not the police station.
Let's drop that act and just be clear. I know you were sent here to watch me. You are Detective Watcher Bunlock. I'm familiar with the cases you have worked on in the past. However, if you expect to catch me handing over government documents to shady bunbuds while everyone is distracted, you are sorely mistaken. I've been retired for over 20 years now. I want you to ask yourself why you were sent here to watch an old man with one foot in the grave already.
It doesn't matter if you're retired or not. You still have major connections to the existing revolutionaries, and it's my job to try and figure out your purpose here.
My purpose? Huh, that's a funny concept. Well, I'm just a retired military vet doing his country one final service on his way out.
Bunner turned around and joined the rest of the group as Watcher stayed stuck in thought as he processed the conversation. He then slipped the newspaper clipping into his pocket and joined up with the group. After an hour of discussing the tragic end of Isaac's life and the mysterious disappearance of the two servants, everyone decides that it is getting late and that they should at the very least get some rest. They agreed that in the morning they would call the chauffeur and arrange to be taken back tomorrow. Chapter 3, Section 1. Watcher was the first to wake up. At once he rose from his bed and went to the landline to call the chauffeur. He gave up on the idea and decided to investigate the dining hall. As he walked to the dining hall, he looked out to see a great snowstorm completely sealing the mansion. He made it to the dining hall, where he found that everything had been cleaned and restored back to how it looked when they first arrived. He let out a sigh of annoyance and began inspecting the area where Isaac had last been, before they all left for the kitchen. He looked at the bottle that Isaac had taken his final drink from and opened it up. He gave it a quick whiff, then poured a little into the cap and tasted it. While there was no foul taste, it seemed to be a tad bit acidic, and so he closed the bottle up and decided to keep it to have Dr. Chunyao examine it. After this, he returned to his room and fell back to sleep. An hour or two passed before he was awoken by a grandfather clock ringing out, signaling the start of the second day. After an hour or so, everyone gathered in the hall with a slightly solemn atmosphere lingering in the air. The group then headed down towards the dining hall, where they found that the table had been set and food had been prepared for everyone. One by one, each guest sat down in the same seats they occupied yesterday, but noticed that 2 spots were empty when only 1 should be. They waited a few minutes before Watcher and Chunyao both got up at the same time and headed to check up on Olivia and Bunner. The pair climbed up the stairs and knocked on Bunner's door, but heard no response. They waited a minute before knocking again, but this time louder. Again, there was no response. They tried opening the door, but it was locked, so the pair returned downstairs and asked Strawthorn and Kaz to come up with them. The 4 returned to Bunner's door and knocked one final time. Once again, nothing but silence.
Please excuse us, Mr. Bunner, but we're coming in one way or another.
The 4 counted down to 3 and kicked the door open with all their force, causing it to break open and destroy the deadbolt and chain lock that were set. On the bed laid Olivia and Bunner in a peaceful rest and unresponsive. Chunyao immediately ran to check his vitals as Strawthorn and Strawkowski joined him. While the 3 were hovering over Bunner, trying to determine if he was still alive or not, Watcher searched the room and noticed another newspaper clipping near Bunner's bed. He picked it up and began to read it to himself.
Breaking news. Bunbud Commander found dead. Straw Bunny intelligence officials confirmed this morning that a lead suspect in their investigation of the December 7th failed uprising, Benedict Budsworth, has been found dead in his apartment. There are currently no details as to how he died or who may have killed him. Officials say that this is both a blessing and a curse, as Benedict was possibly linked to multiple branches of underground Bunbud operations. A thorough search of his apartment turned up no documents pertaining to that side of his life, and no evidence of the mysterious vigilante who ended his life.
Watcher slipped the clipping into his pocket and joined the 3 who were inspecting Bunner's body.
So, how's it looking?
He passed away in his sleep. It seems like he suffered some sort of heart failure or another, but I'm not certain.
Another one gone. Have we heard anything from the butlers? They've been missing since last night.
I saw them preparing breakfast this morning. I woke up extra early and wandered around the manor trying to tire myself out to go back to bed.
I see. You know, I also woke up early. I must have missed you. Did you happen to ask them about the recording? Or where they were last night?
A shame we missed each other, and yes, I was able to ask them, and they said they had retired early and were already asleep around the time we heard the recording and chased after Isaac.
Well, isn't that oddly convenient? Regardless, I say we should lay a sheet over dear Bunner and head back down to break the news.
Strawthorn found a spare sheet in the closet and laid it over Bunner before the 4 headed downstairs again and entered the dining hall.
Bunner will be unable to join us for breakfast. It seems he has passed away in his sleep. Miss Bonini says it's most likely heart failure.
A painful silence enveloped the hall as everyone processed the news.
So another mongrel has been put down.
Freddles glared slightly at him.
What I mean to say is that it truly is a shame that he met his end here and not with his family. But I don't think this should stop us from enjoying this meal that those useless dogs of the house prepared for us. A pity they don't seem to be around. A great deal of my curiosity would be fulfilled if they were.
Everyone stared at Golden Bun with a mix of annoyance but also apprehension. At Golden Bun's words, they began picking at their food and eating a little. After they ate, everyone split off into small groups and went about the manor searching for the butlers. Kaz stayed behind, saying that he wanted to at least clear the table, and so everyone left. Kaz picked up the dishes quickly and brought them to the sink, where he started washing them. Section 2.
So Watcher was up too, huh? That's odd. When I woke up, I listened into everyone's rooms through their doors, and they were all sound asleep. I heard the butlers preparing breakfast, which is when I talked to them. Then I ran around the mansion looking for any clues or passageways, but I didn't find any. All in all, that whole process only took about an hour and a half. I didn't hear or see anyone else leave their room, and I confirmed once again that everyone was sleeping when I returned to my room. It's possible for him to wake up after me, but I was unable to go back to sleep, and at no point did I hear Watcher Bunlock leave his room.
After running through this order of events in his head, Kaz Strelkowski became suspicious of Watcher's claim of being up early, and so he set off to find and observe his actions. After searching for a few minutes, he found Watcher rummaging around Bunner's room, and so he quickly entered the room and went into the closet directly across from the bed that Watcher was currently looking under. Once in the closet, he silenced his breathing and quietly watched Bunlock search under Bunner's bed. Bunlock emerged with a needle in his hand and seemed to be quite overjoyed at finding it. He then stood up and began to walk out of the room. As Bunlock passed by this closet, he suddenly stopped and looked directly at where Kaz was standing.
No, that just won't do. I already checked there earlier. There's no one in there. It would be way too cliche to have someone hiding in there now. Right?
Watcher slowly reached for the door.
Wait, no. If there's a killer in there, that would be like really freaking scary, right? On second thought, maybe I should just leave it alone. I mean, after all, I was just trying to find something, and that something is not a knife in my throat.
Watcher slowly backed away from the closet and ran down the hall before tripping.
Ah, this is it. My life is over.
Silence filled the room before the sound of Watcher getting back up with a sigh of relief and running off again. Kaz let out a long breath and stepped out of the closet before he set off to tail Bunlock. A slight feeling of unease crept into his heart as the sound of footsteps emanated from behind him. He quickly turned his head to check where the sound was coming from, but nothing but empty space greeted him. Shaking off the feeling of unease, Kaz quickly ran down the stairs and looked for Watcher once more. The sound of Watcher's voice could be heard from one of the rooms down the hall, and so Kaz began walking towards the source at a brisk pace. Watcher could be heard talking to someone, but the exact details of the conversation seemed to be muffled behind the door. Kaz looked through the keyhole in the door, but nothing but darkness was on the other side. However, he could still hear Watcher's voice coming from the far corner of the room. Kaz looked around to see if anyone was nearby and quietly entered the room. The sound of Watcher's voice became clearer as soon as he opened the door, and he held his breath as he silently closed the door behind him and let his eyes adjust to the dark. He searched along the wall for a light switch and found it off to the right of the door. He counted himself down from 3 and flicked the switch, but nothing happened. Instead, the sound of Watcher's voice abruptly stopped before starting back up again in an almost mechanical fashion. Kaz crept towards where the voice was coming from as it became clearer and clearer.
Another one gone. Isn't that oddly convenient? Wait. Another one gone. It would be way too cliche. Isn't that oddly convenient? This is it. Another one gone.
What the hell is this guy going on about?
He finally reached the far corner where a large wardrobe stood in the dark. Kaz counted down once again from 3 and flung open the doors. However, what greeted him inside was not Watcher, but a cassette player breaking and looping Watcher's voice. Kaz immediately understood that he was led here on purpose and quickly turned around and sprinted towards the door. However, suddenly the lights in the room flashed on and blinded him before a bag was thrown over his head. Section 3. Watcher returned to the dining hall where he found Chunyao resting on one of the chairs.
Hey there, Doc. Taking a break from the search? Has anyone found the butlers yet?
We found the Chef Benedict. He was reading in the library and said he has been there since this morning. It looked like he was reading some wilderness survival guide for fun.
An interesting hobby, that's for sure. I can't blame him, though. I'm just glad that we found one of the butlers. Doc, I wanted to ask your opinion on something. I managed to get a hold of these, and I was wondering if there were any tests you could run, or even just experienced observations that you might be able to make of them.
Watcher handed Chunyao the bottle that Isaac had last taken a drink from, and a needle he found under Bunner's bed. Chunyao gently placed the bottle on the table and went over to the bar where she grabbed a sealed bottle of the same drink and returned. She then took out 2 colorful strips of paper and placed them on some napkins before pouring a few drops on each paper and watching the slips of paper carefully. After a few seconds, the color changed, and she stayed quiet for a moment before speaking.
There's no doubt about it. This bottle has some sort of chemical in it that is making it a bit more basic. Without getting lost in the weeds, I can say for certain that this bottle has been tampered with in some way.
Watcher nodded his head in understanding.
Do you have any clue what could be in the syringe? Do you remember seeing any marks on Bunner? I briefly looked over his body when I was searching the room, but I don't recall seeing anything that stood out.
Chunyao shook her head.
Sorry, I can't say I did. We have to wait for the police to arrive before anything is determined for sure.
Yes, that's actually another thing I wanted to mention. It looks like the phone lines are down. I tried calling the chauffeur this morning, but nothing has gone through. We might be stuck here for a while. At least until the storm outside settles a bit.
That's a bit worrying, but it would make sense considering how violent the storm is outside. I'll try it out myself once I frizz it up.
Watcher nodded and left the dining hall to question Benedict about the library. When he heard a soft thud coming from the hallway, he turned around immediately and returned to the dining hall.
Hey, Doc, sorry to bother you so soon. I just heard the strangest noise from the hallway outside, and my paranoia might be getting the better of me, but would you mind accompanying me to check it out?
Chunyao nodded and rose from her seat, taking the tampered bottle and the syringe as a precaution before joining Watcher. The pair saw the light seeping out from underneath one of the rooms and quietly approached it. Once they drew closer, they noticed that the door was slightly ajar, and Watcher peeked into the room. It was well lit inside, and nothing looked out of the ordinary aside from a messy bed and the doors to the wardrobe in the corner of the room being wide open. The pair then stepped inside and looked around. Watcher then saw a figure lying on the bed on the opposite side and walked closer. He signaled for Chunya to come over, and she quickly dropped to the floor to check Kaz's vitals. As Bonini checked Strakowski's body, Watcher looked around the room and found a newspaper clipping stuck underneath a cassette player. He pulled it out and read to himself.
Botched experiment or foul play. Professor Unther Norman found dead in his laboratory this morning. His research assistants testify that they had left him alone with an old research pal the night before, but when they returned in the morning to review the results, they found him dead and his research all missing. Kaz Strakowski is currently the lead suspect in the case, but has gone missing.
It looks like once again we were too late. This time I can say for certain that this was no accident, and it definitely wasn't suicide. Kaz was most definitely killed by the hands of somebody. It looks like they used some kind of bag to suffocate him.
The two lifted Kaz onto the bed and laid a sheet over him before they stepped out of the room and decided to head to the library together to meet up with the others. Chapter 4, Section 1. Chunyao and Watcher arrived at the small library on the other side of the mansion, where they found everyone sitting together. Both butlers were attending to the group with light snacks and tea.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to see everyone's here, and that we found the butlers. I regret that I do have to inform everyone that during the time we were all split up, Kaz Strakowski was killed.
The room suddenly became quiet as everyone turned and looked at Watcher.
Where did you find him?
In one of the guest rooms to the right of the dining hall. Chuniao and I discovered him on the floor. We believe he had been suffocated with some kind of bag.
That's weird. I'm sure both Stronikin and I locked the doors to the first floor when we went to bed last night.
That's right. We both checked all the rooms and locked them up before we went to bed.
With wary eyes, the group then shifted their attention to the two butlers.
You guys are gonna kill me next with those looks. But you've been with us the whole time since you found us, and I would also like to point something else out. Kaz told us this morning that Zach had unfortunately passed away last night, and that you guys had laid him to rest in a nearby room, correct?
Everyone nodded.
However, both Stronikin and I can testify and guarantee that all the first floor rooms were locked when we went to sleep. We were tired early last night, and so it stands to reason that you should have not been able to gain access to any of the first floor rooms.
What useless dribble is this filthy dog in the mansion spouting out? You guys have already displayed a lack of professionalism and ability by failing to inform us of your early retirement yesterday. It is not out of the question that both of you simply forgot to lock one, if not more, of the rooms. Besides, do you simply believe us to be so stupid as to believe you two really were asleep at all? You have no guarantee that you had gone to bed early or that you stayed in bed the entire night.
While I hate to encourage this uncouth man, he speaks the truth. Do you guys have any guarantee that you both not only were in your rooms, but remained there from after you left us to clean the dishes to this morning? A small look of amusement and appreciation crossed Foxy's face as the priest backed up his claim.
We did not. However, if we begin suspecting one another of being capable of doing such a horrible thing to another person, then surely we'll be playing right into the culprit's hands by isolating ourselves and staying distant. I urge you to at least have a basic level of trust in us.
I would like to add that this morning, while I didn't see the butlers, I did a walk around the mansion and checked all the doors. They were all locked, except for the one leading to the room where we left Bunnington in, of course. And then I checked twice more today. Once after we discovered Bunner's body, and once more right after we all split off to find the butlers. Each time they were still locked.
A slight look of relief washed over Kenryu's face.
I met with Bonlock after splitting up from all of you. This means that at the very least Benedict could not have done it since the timeline wouldn't match up.
Everyone looked at each other with a hint of skepticism, but accepted Chuniao's logic and shifted their attention to Stronikin.
If it would ease your hearts to suspect me, then I will take on your suspicion. However, I can assure you that it was not me. Mr. Strawthorne and Mr. Strawkin can both attest to my innocence in this matter.
As easy as it would be to pin the blame on Stronikin, it isn't that simple. We both found him cleaning the guest bathroom upstairs and stayed with him till he finished. And after he did, we returned here and saw Banini entering the dining hall from the hallway. What this means is that the room that Kaz was killed in was still locked when we met up with everyone here.
I can back up this timeline. Strawthorne and I both saw Dr. Bonini returning to the dining hall.
Where are all the keys that can unlock the first floor rooms?
Just the two master keys that we possess.
As far as I'm aware, the only keys that could unlock those doors would be our master keys.
Stronikin reached into his pocket and drew out a large key with an elaborate design.
This is my master key. We were each given only one when we were employed, and there are only two of these master keys.
Benedict fished around his pocket, and a look of confusion flashed by his face. He then checked another one of his pockets, and another one, and another. before he let out a nervous chuckle.
I seem to have lost mine somewhere. I usually keep it in this pocket, but it's missing.
Benedict then overturned his pockets and found a hole at the bottom of his back pocket.
I don't remember ever putting my key back here, but it's possible I put it in there this morning to make room in my other pockets to carry as many packets of oatmeal as I could from the pantry.
What a sorry excuse for your carelessness. I bet you handed your key to your co-conspirator and cut that hole to use as an excuse if anyone began to suspect you.
Kenryu stood up with a rage-filled expression. That's enough, Sir Foxy. Please don't instigate any fights when we are already on edge from these circumstances. I propose we split into 3 groups. One will stay in the library with Stronican. The second will go down to with Bunlock to investigate the room that Strokowski was found in to see if the key is in there. The third will go with Benedict to the pantry to see if his key is still lying around on the floor somewhere. And while we're down there, I believe it would be wise to move as much sealed food and drink to the kitchen to avoid any future trips down to the pantry that could lead to unnecessary risk and seclusion. Everyone thought for a moment before nodding in agreement, and so the remaining 7 people split off into these 3 groups: Bunlock and Strawthorn, Stronican and Bonini, and finally Sir Foxy, Strauchan, and Benedict. Section 2. The trio left the library, taking Stronican's master key with them to unlock the basement door, and also as an added safety precaution to ensure that he didn't slip out when Shunya was distracted and unlock any doors that could still be locked. Then they started heading out towards the pantry, while Sir Foxy stared daggers at Benedict, and Strauchan kept telling him to cut it out. As they neared the basement door, they looked around and saw Strawthorn and Bunlock descending as well. Both groups briefly reconvened and then watched each other enter their respective rooms. After Strauchan unlocked the basement door, the trio began descending the spiral staircase that led to the pantry and wine cellar. The further they went down, the colder it began to get, as if the chill of death were slowly encroaching upon them.
I always hated being sent down here. The only time I liked going down here was in the summer after tending the garden. I would always find an excuse to come down here and rest where it was nice and cool year round. I started it here off as the gardener, but truth be told, I hated it and was much more passionate about cooking.
Life does seem to lead us down many twists and turns. I too started off doing something completely unrelated to serving in the church. But one thing led to another, and a chance encounter has brought me to where I am today.
If you two are conspiring to kill me by boredom through your sentimental retellings of your past, it is most assuredly working. I have never been more bored in my life.
Strauchan shoots Sir Foxy a warning glance.
Don't look at me like that, dog of the church. I merely wish to say that we are wasting valuable energy talking when we should be more worried about how we are going to find a gray key on a stone floor.
It's a pretty fancy key, so it shouldn't be too difficult to find it if it's still down here.
The trio finally reached the bottom, where Benedict searched around the right side of the wall and flipped the light switch, which illuminated the room. They then began retracing Benedict's route from this morning. They each searched the ground for the key and doubled back to search once more, but they found nothing. Finally, they reached the end of the pantry, where all the oatmeal packets were stored, and something shiny caught the eye of Benedict.
I found something.
The other two quickly came over as they spotted the metallic object glinting in the sunlight. Kenryu reached for the object and pulled it out from underneath a sack of oatmeal packets.
What's this? Some kind of pendant?
Let me see. Quite the exquisite piece of jewelry for a dirty place like this. How strange. This is the crest of Uzbekistan. The picture in the pendant is too faded for me to tell who it is, but this definitely comes from royalty.
So you're useful for something after all.
I seem to have heard the yapping of a dog around here. How strange. I can even smell the stink of hubris coming from a certain house spot.
The two glared at each other as Strauchan sighed. Let's not fight one another, especially in the presence of our great leader's emblem. We should bring this pendant with us up to the library to see if Strauchan can recognize it, or if we can find any pictures in the books. The other two backed down for a minute, and the trio began collecting non-perishable foods and sealed bottles of wine, as well as jugs of water, before they began to head back up the stairs. As they neared the stairs, the lights flickered and they quickened their pace. Finally, they arrived at the foot of the stairs and began ascending. Sir Foxy and Strauchan began debating who should go search the books for pictures and who will talk to Strauchan as they continued climbing. As Kenryu began to climb, he noticed a second glinting object near the edge of the wine cellar and dropped his bag to quickly go grab it. As he neared the object, he noticed it was the master key he had dropped earlier, sitting next to an expensive bottle of wine. He looked around and saw no one, so he put the master key in his pocket and took the bottle of wine. He put the wine bottle in his bag of food and began ascending the stairs as he could still faintly hear the voices of Sir Foxy and Strauchan ahead. He heard their footsteps stop as they seemed to have reached the top, and they called down. Is everything all right, Benedict? Do you need help carrying your bag?
Hurry up, dog of the manor. My time is much too valuable to be spent waiting on the likes of you. If it were not for this annoying lapdog of the church, I would have left you down there long ago.
Remind me again who was too worried about injuring their hand and brought the least amount of items up? If your strength matches your ego, maybe I wouldn't need to be carrying so much. Also, I would like to throw in that I'm only this far behind because I found the master key and went to retrieve it.
That's wonderful to hear. We'll set down our bags outside the door and come down to help you. The pair at the top opened the door and walked out to set their bags down in the hallway. Kenryu continued to climb the stairs when out of nowhere he feels something catch his ankle. In an instant he is jerked backwards and he yells out while trying to catch himself, but fails and tumbles down the stairs. Strauchan and Sir Foxy hear Benedict's cry and immediately drop their bags and begin running down the stairs. At the bottom they see a mess of food on the floor and a small trail of blood leading from the foot of the stairs back into the pantry. The pair runs to the light and flips the switch on, but none of the lights turn on. Section 3. Sir Foxy and Strauchan slowly followed the trail of blood as it led back into the pantry. They were careful not to step directly on the trail in case it was important evidence later, and so they each walked on either side of the trail as they inched closer and closer to the end. Finally, after carefully following the trail, they ran into a large metal door with a faded label that read freezer. The pair looked around once again and ensured that nobody else was in the room with them as they placed their hands on the old freezer door and pulled it open together. A blast of frigid air slammed into them immediately as the two stepped in, making sure to leave the door propped open through both a crate of wine they placed at the edge of the frame, as well as a plank of wood they broke off from the crate to place inside the space between the hinges and door, ensuring there was no way to accidentally close themselves in. They turned the light switch on, and a dim light poorly lit up the room. They could barely see the trail of blood as they continued following it. Soon it led them into a large walk-in meat freezer, where a few slabs of meat lay scattered across the room, hanging on hooks. It's as cold as the heart of a bun in here. Maybe we should turn back and put on some clothes more suited for this escapade.
The fire of your passion can only warm you up so much, dog of the church.
He takes off a light jacket he was wearing and puts it on Strauchan.
Don't get it twisted, you mangy mutt. It would be a great hindrance to me if you couldn't carry your bag of supplies up because your hands got frostbitten.
Thank you, Sir Foxy. At first I must admit that I did not see the light of our glorious leader in your soul. but it seems our leada had not yet planned to show me that light until now. A faint smile crossed Sir Foxy's lips as he lengthened his stride and pulled ahead slightly. They soon reached a cold storage room for cold cuts and fish, where they found Benedict's body, not yet frozen. They searched his body and found the master key. Then they went on either side of him and lifted him up between their shoulders. As they began carrying his body back, they slowly trudged through the meat freezer and back through the refrigerator room where they had come in from. They brought Benedict back to the foot of the stairs, where they sat him down and took a rest on the stairs. Getting him up the stairs will be a chore, but once we get him up, we can finally put him to rest. Getting him up the stairs will be a chore, but once we're able to, we can finally put him to rest. Somewhere as dark and cold as this is no place for such a fine man as Benedict to rest. However,
let me rest a little longer before you state the obvious. I don't fancy the idea of not being alone down here, but that is an almost certain fact given where we found this man.
A faint smile grew on Strachan's lips before it was replaced with a wide-eyed stare. My eyes may be playing tricks on me, but look. Strachan pointed to the freezer door that they had left open.
What about it? Is your good conscience weighing on you because we left the door to the overgrown fridge open?
That's not it. When we left the fridge, I had forgotten to turn off the light, but I don't see it on now. The two stood up and picked Benedict up. As they slowly began backing up the stairwell, they half carried, half dragged Benedict up for what seemed like an eternity before reaching the top of the stairs. They pushed the door open and collapsed to the ground as they caught their breath. After a few minutes, they regained their energy and looked around the hallway. Quickly, go fetch the doctor. And don't forget this. Strachan gave Sir Foxy the master key that Stranakin had given to them.
What are you going to do? Don't go back down there by yourself. I know your brain is only filled with faith and prayer, but I also know that for a Mongol, you're pretty smart.
I'll take that as a compliment. I'm going to go ask Bunlock and Strawthorn to accompany me down to see if we can catch this incarnation of evil while they're trapped. This is the only entrance and exit, and they have yet to come up, meaning they're still stuck down there. The two parted ways as Sir Foxy ran up the stairs to get Dr. Bonini, while Strachan went to the room on the other side of the hall to get Bunlock and Strawthorn. Strachan entered the room and looked around for Bunlock and Strawthorn, but didn't see them anywhere. As he wandered around the room, he faintly heard the voices of the ones he was looking for outside. He quickly ran out the room and saw a figure close the basement door and run down the stairs. As he ran to the basement door, he heard Sir Foxy coming down the stairs with Bonini, and he called out, "Sir Foxy! Dr. Bonini! I just saw Strawthorn and Bunlock enter the basement stairwell. I believe they may have grown suspicious when Sir Foxy and I didn't return and ran down to check on us. I'm running down now to warn them of the danger down there."
Wait just a minute. I'll join you.
Sir Foxy called out, but by the time he got down with Dr. Bonini, Strachan had already entered the stairwell.
That idiot! Dr. Nini, stay here and inspect Benedict's body. If I don't return in 30 minutes, lock this door and return to Stranakin. These are the only two keys that are able to lock and unlock this door, so even if the worst comes to pass, the killer will be locked down there until the police arrive.
Sir Foxy gave both master keys to Dr. Bonini and ran after Strachan. He quickly descended as he called out Strachan's name. Finally, he reached the bottom, where an eerie silence filled the room. He crept over to the freezer before he felt a pair of hands touch him. He jumped back and swung around.
Wait, it's just me.
Me as well. We just saw Strachan run into the freezer room.
Why are you two down here?
We were in the kitchen organizing the food that you guys had brought up when we heard you two talking. We went out to join up with you and saw Benedict's body, and Strachan was gone.
Yes, then we went back to the room that we were searching before, but we didn't see him there. So we thought maybe he might have run down the stairs, whether to investigate or get more food or whatever. We followed him down here.
Sir Foxy shot them a wary gaze as he skeptically accepted their account.
And then you saw him run in the freezer? Why didn't you try to stop him?
We didn't see him until he had already gone in, and we heard you coming down, so we figured we'd wait for you.
Well, let's go. I swear that priest is nothing but trouble.
The trio quickly went into the freezer room. As they looked around for Strachan, Bunlock and Strawthorn pulled out some flashlights they had found in the pantry and gave an extra one to Sir Foxy. The three entered the walk-in meat freezer section, where they continued searching for Strachan. Finally, they made their way to the extra storage room, where Benedict had been found. Sir Foxy gently opened the door, and standing there with his arms stretched out towards the sky was Strachan. The three approached Strachan and looked at him.
Get enough sleep for the both of us, partner.
Strawthorn and Sir Foxy carefully lifted Strachan's body up as they carried him out. Bunlock walked behind them with a flashlight before he noticed a piece of paper stuck on one of the hooks. He carefully took it off the hook and read it to himself as he followed the other two out.
Witchcraft or religious ceremony gone awry. On the 17th of May, Bunathan Ownwell was found buried underneath what investigators call a magic circle. He was last seen alive 2 days prior, where he allegedly got into a fight with the head of the local church, Reverend Freddles, after which he left the church but disappeared on his way home. The current lead suspect is Strachan Freddles. However, around the same time, he too disappeared, and the village locals refused to give any information to the authorities on the matter, out of fear of receiving divine punishment.
Chapter 5, Section 1. Strawthorn, Sir Foxy, and Bunlock all returned from the pantry, carrying the supplies that Benedict had left at the foot of the stairs, along with Strachan's body. Upon reaching the top, they gently laid Strachan down, and Dr. Bonini began inspecting the body. Strawthorn and Sir Foxy both went up to the library to find Strachan, while Bunlock stayed with Bonini and inspected Benedict's body, where he found a slip of paper hidden away in his back pocket.
Construction begins on the Unich estate. A plot of land has recently been purchased by Sir Unich Norman, one of the 12 justices of the High Court of Usachi Stan. A small controversy arose when the land was originally purchased due to its historical significance as one of the key points in the Abyssal Wars, where our esteemed leader laid siege to the Abyss's headquarters and paved way for the reclamation of Strabania. However, in the end, Usachi Yui herself granted permission to Unich Norman, allowing him to begin construction on the new estate built in her honor.
Bunlock then escorted Bonini back upstairs to meet with everyone in the library. Section 2. Everyone gathered together in the library, where a heavy silence filled the room. Sir Foxy pulled out a pendant from his coat pocket and laid it down on the table.
While we were down in the pantry, we found this where Benedict had gotten this morning's oatmeal from. Any idea whose it might be?
The pendant was passed around between each person, but none seemed familiar with the design. Finally, it came around to Strachan, where he looked at it for a minute before passing it back to Sir Foxy.
This is one of the Norman family pendants. Each member had one specially crafted for them, and each pendant had a unique design that was made to match the one who wore it. Unfortunately, I cannot say that I recognize who this pendant belongs to. The design seems familiar, but I know for sure that it is not the Master's.
How can you be so sure?
Strachan shook his head and remained silent for a minute.
When the Master passed, his remaining family fought for his inheritance, and took away anything that seemed of value to them. In fact, the only reason this mansion still bears his name, and was only occupied by myself and Benedict, was because the Master transferred ownership of it to this country's sovereign, as a sign of goodwill and a token of appreciation for allowing him to build his retirement home on historic soil. This pendant and this estate are all we have left to remember him by. The Master entrusted this pendant to me with instructions to keep it hidden until the promised day arrived.
The promised day? Is that part of the faith?
Strachan shook his head once more.
He believed that one day his missing son would be found, and that when that day arrived, whether he was dead or alive, he should be given this pendant.
Huh. A missing son? Is there anything else that you could tell us?
Unfortunately, I don't know any more about his son. However, as you can see, the style of the pendant from the pantry matches the pendant from my late master.
Everyone stared at the pendant for a moment before noticing a slight chill in the air. Sir Foxy winced slightly at the drop in temperature and walked towards one of the vents.
The heating system seems to have stopped working. Is this another one of the cowardly mongrels' tricks to separate us again? How utterly worthless. A slight chill is of smaller significance than the life of the scoundrel who committed these atrocities in my presence.
The group continued discussing the pendant and its significance as the temperature continued to slowly decline. After a couple of hours, the house felt nearly as frigid as the outdoors, and everyone agreed to move downstairs to the dining hall, where there was a fireplace. As the group began moving towards the stairs, the lights began to flicker, and suddenly the entire manor was plunged into darkness.
The generator must have failed due to the temperature. Unfortunately for us, this has become an issue we cannot ignore. If the generator were to freeze over, we would be stuck here without electricity for who knows how long.
Then we'll have to make a detour there before we go to the dining hall.
Bunlock, Strawthorn, and Sir Foxy pulled out their flashlights, and Stronican led the way as Bonini followed closely behind. Once they got downstairs, Stronican turned and walked towards the kitchen, where a metal door led to the boiler room. Bonini unlocked the door with one of the master keys, and they all went inside. A vast space revealed itself as they entered the boiler room and looked around. There were several large boilers that stood tall. The heat from the boilers could still be felt despite having been off for several hours. In the corner was an incinerator used for garbage disposal, and along the back wall stretched a large coal-powered generator with an intricate venting system to let off the exhaust. The door to the generator was open, and charred coals lay smoldering in a pile.
We'll have to get fresh coal and some lighting fluid to restart the generator.
Stronican led the group to the left side, where a large chest was sitting. Bonini opened the chest with the master key, and Strawthorn and Bunlock both lifted the heavy iron lid and finally opened it.
There's nothing in here. How is that even possible? You guys were clearly expecting us to stay over here for a few nights. So how come there is no spare coal?
Sir Foxy grabbed Stronican by the collar and pushed him towards the chest.
I can assure you, Sir Foxy, that there was more than enough in the chest when you all had arrived. Even with the amount that the generator requires to run, we had made sure to stockpile on the highest quality coal, so that even in the case that you all needed to stay an extra week, there would be enough coal to sustain us.
Sir Foxy released Stronican and stepped away.
I'm not sure how the culprit managed to remove so much coal by himself, or if he hid it elsewhere, but that doesn't matter. We have a smaller chest with emergency reserves in case we are ever stuck in a storm such as this one.
Stronican turned around and led the group to the opposite corner, where a small crate was hidden away. He opened the crate and found a small batch of coal that was still fresh. Strawthorn and Bunlock helped lift the crate, and together they brought it to the generator, where they dumped the coal in and stepped away. Stronican then walked over to a nearby shelf, where some fire-starting fluid had been sitting, and doused his handkerchief in it, before throwing it into the pile of coal and lighting it up with a match. After a few minutes, Stronican pulled the power switch on the generator down, and it slowly sputtered to life. The boilers came back to life, and the lights returned. Slowly, the manor began to heat up once more. Everyone cheered and quickly left the boiler room. While on their way to the dining hall, they stopped by the kitchen to collect some sealed cans of food and bottles of water. Once they had collected their dinner, they finally made it to the dining hall, where everyone sat down in silence. They all looked around at each other as a thought dawned upon them. The one behind it all was sitting somewhere around this table. Section 3. Dinner drew to a close, and everyone decided it would be best to retire for the night. First they went to the bar in the dining hall, where a small leather box sat on the countertop. Bonini placed the 2 master keys in the box, and then they all placed the box in a glass display case. They locked the door of the display case and walked away together. Then they went to the servants' quarters, where they bid Stronican a good night and moved upstairs. Once they were upstairs, they lined up in front of their rooms and together went into their respective rooms. before locking the doors and placing a chair underneath each door handle. Stronican laid down in his bed, staring up at the ceiling as he held onto his late master's pendant. He slowly drifted off to sleep, holding tightly onto the pendant. A few hours passed, and Stronican suddenly woke up. Almost instantly, he noticed a dark figure in the corner of the room.
I suppose it's my time to exit the stage now, isn't it?
It didn't have to end this way, Shawnigan. You know just as well as I do that this was an end you brought upon yourself.
Before you end me, can you at least tell me if there's any purpose in my death? Is it revenge? There was nothing we could have done to save the master.
Purpose in your death? No. In the end, death is the great equalizer. The only thing that can give a death meaning is the life that preceded it. Also, you know just as well as I do that I don't believe that excuse. Your sloth brought upon the death of a great man. However, as thanks for earlier, I'll at least bring a peaceful end to your overstayed life.
I am grateful that you will at least grant me that much, after all that I have done to you.
Stronican let out a deep breath as he prepared himself for the end. He felt a slight prick as his mind slowly muddled and faded to black. Section 4. The grandfather clock chimed 9 times as everyone woke up and prepared themselves for another stressful day. They each removed the chairs from underneath their handles and unlocked their doors. Everyone then stepped into the hallway at the same time and looked at one another.
Welcome to another day.
Good to see you all still here.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
The 4 walked down the stairs into the servants' quarters to check on Stronican, although a creeping feeling in each one of them told them they would be greeting another corpse soon. They knocked on the door to the servants' quarters and received no response. They tried a second time in futile hope as they began to suspect another one of them had gone. Bunlock turned the knob and entered the room first. On the bed lay Stronican, seemingly in a peaceful sleep, and Bonini slowly approached him before checking his pulse. Watcher looked around the room and stepped onto a small sheet of paper.
Chief Justice Eunich Norman passes away. This morning, Chief Justice Eunich Norman was reported dead by his butlers. He was found seemingly asleep in his bed this morning as they brought him breakfast. But the head butler noticed something was off and contacted the family doctor. The doctor confirmed later that day that he had died of natural causes. Our great leader, Usachi Yui, has announced that she will be giving a speech to honor one of the longest-serving members of her high court.
Bunlock slid the paper into his pocket alongside all the others he had collected thus far, and looked around for more clues before spotting a syringe on the floor, much like the one he had given to Dr. Bonini the day before. He looked at Bonini, who was carefully examining the body, and then at everyone else, who seemed preoccupied with watching the doctor at work. He decided to confront Bonini about it later, so as to not arouse any unnecessary suspicion. Finally, the group laid a sheet over Stronican and left the room quietly. They grabbed some canned food from the kitchen and walked to the dining hall, where they sat down and slowly ate their breakfast, while quietly judging one another, trying to determine who was the most suspicious. Everyone quietly waited for someone to speak up, but breakfast would continue on and pass in silence. After eating breakfast, they checked the glass display case and found that it was still locked, and the glass was still intact. From there, they returned upstairs and went to the library to try and see if they could find any more clues relating to the pendant that Sir Foxy had found yesterday. They quietly walked around the library, gathering books related to the royal families of the past and present, before quietly reconvening at the large table in the middle. Chapter 6. Section 1. The hours begin to pass in an almost paradoxical manner, where each minute seems to drag on past infinity, yet the hours blend together into one, and soon the natural alarm bell of hunger reminds them all of how much time has truly passed. Watcher finally breaks the silence as he makes a proposal.
Throughout the last few days, I've searched around the manor at any moment I had available to me. However, the nature of each victim's end only gets stranger and stranger, and seemingly more impossible. Each death now could be explained with the addition of some unknown culprit, but the authors decided to follow at least some of Nox's commandments.
Watcher turns to the camera and stares directly at you.
I also know that we've been making progress towards discovering the true identity of our killer. Unfortunately for us, we are still bound by our biological needs, and so I propose that we split up. Briefly.
What other nonsense are you spouting now? You realize that dividing out numbers is exactly what the enemy wants?
Yes, but I don't believe we can risk taking a break from our research.
So you believe this research is more important than sticking together to stop anyone else from dying?
You're failing to see the bigger picture here, Sir Foxy. Splitting up this moment is a guarantee for our safety. If we split up right now, 2 of us can continue researching up here and bringing us closer to the truth, while the other 2 can go down and collect more than enough food to keep us fed and safe up here, where we can all focus our efforts on researching the pendant.
That's true, but I still can't see how splitting up is advantageous. If anything, you're making yourself look more suspicious by pushing us to split up.
Look, I understand that much, but let me run you through my logic. If we split up now, the culprit will be unable to kill any of us without exposing their identity. If I were the culprit and I went down with Chuniao and then killed her and returned, alone, I would immediately be found out. And the same remains true if either of you are the culprit and we return to only one of you remaining.
That's true, but it could also be true that the pair that returned simply had bad timing or some other factor came in, and only one person was able to return or remain.
I had considered that as well. It's definitely plausible that after we split up, the culprit kills another person and hides their body, then makes some logical excuse for why the other person is missing. However, if I were the killer, I think I would want us to stay together right now.
And why is that?
Well, I believe it would be a lot easier to slip away from a group of 3 other people all focused on collecting food than it would be to slip away from one other person who's focused on their task and on monitoring their partner. Once the culprit slips away, they're free to roam around and do as they please. Yes, there's strength in numbers, but it's also easier to lose track of someone the more people there are.
You make a valid point. Alright, you've won me over with your logic.
Good. Does anyone else oppose this brief separation?
I'm still a little shaky on fully supporting it, but you did make some good points, and if I think it through a little more, I'm sure that I would have arrived at the same conclusion.
I believe it is important that we stay fed, and I also reached the same reasoning when you were talking it through with Sir Foxy.
Great. Then Dr. Bignini and I will go down to collect food for all of us, while the 2 of you can stay up here and continue looking into the pendant.
With that, the group of 4 split up, and Bunlock and Bonini start making their way to the kitchen. As they were walking down the stairs, Bunlock cleared his throat.
So, what do you think of the pendant? Were you able to find anything out about it?
Not quite, but I feel like I'm on the edge of a breakthrough. There was this particular book that stood out to me while I was in a library yesterday that seemed to be a collection of children's books. It stood out to me given how different it was from the rest of the books. And I believe it may be tied to Unit lost son.
Watcher listened attentively and logged this new information into his memory.
That's amazing, Dr. Benini. I can't believe I didn't pick up on that earlier.
Bonini smiled softly as they finally reached the kitchen and began filling up the sacks with as much food as they could. A strange, comforting silence filled the room as the pair finished collecting food. After that, they began ascending the stairs.
Say, Dr. Benini, do you still have that syringe I gave you yesterday?
Bonini froze for a second.
No, it disappeared from my room last night.
Is that so? Well, that's a little worrying. Were you at least able to find out what was in it?
No, I wasn't able to before it disappeared. After you gave it to me, I put it in my bag and then Sir Proxy called me down to inspect Benedict's body. And from then on, I wasn't able to make time to return to my room. Then last night, as I was going to bed, I looked for it and I couldn't find it anywhere.
But everything else was left in your bag.
Yes, just the syringe went missing.
So in other words, were we to find the syringe, you would still be able to analyze it.
Bonini nodded.
Well, I just so happened to find the syringe in Stronigan's room this morning. I suggest we go grab your bag, and you can take a look at analyzing it over lunch.
That's great. I hope it can lead to something else.
The pair made a quick detour to Bonini's room, where they grabbed her medical bag, and then they returned to the library and explained the situation to Strawthorn and Sir Foxy. They each grabbed their choice of canned food from the bags that Bunlock and Bonini had brought with them, and cleared a space on the table where Bonini could work. They ate quietly as Bonini set up a small workstation in the space that was cleared for her. Then she sat down and joined the other three in lunch, where Bunlock explained the history of the syringe, which sparked a small conversation about what the contents of the syringe could possibly be, before returning once more to talking about the pendant. And finally, they finished their meals in silence. After a few minutes, everyone settled back into their roles and continued desperately searching for anything leading to the identity of the pendant's owner, but to no avail. The minutes turned to hours, and exhaustion began to set in for all four remaining guests.
It looks like we were able to make it through the day without any further incidents occurring. I believe we should all turn in for tonight. We can continue tomorrow.
Sounds like a plan. The storm seems to have died down a little, so I hope that we'll be able to leave in a couple of days.
Yes, I hope so as well. Please, all of you, make sure to lock your doors and put chairs under the handles tonight. Seems that the culprit was able to get into Stronigan's room despite him having locked the door. However, they didn't get to any of us. I can only assume that putting the chairs under the handles made the difference and was sufficient enough to deter the culprit last night.
Everyone nodded in agreement as they all got up and walked to their rooms together. Once again, they all stood in front of their respective doors and entered at the same time. The sounds of 4 locks clicking and 4 chairs being dragged against the floor before placed under the handle signified the sealing of each room for the night, and soon silence enveloped the manor. Section 2. Bonini sat at her desk and continued examining the sample. It seemed like just plain salt water, but she was unable to determine if that was all there was to it, or if there had been some kind of chemical mixed into it. She continued examining it before finally putting it away, and concluding that it was mere salt water and nothing else. She placed the syringe back into her bag and lay down in bed as she stared up at the ceiling.
Just plain old salt water, huh? That's a bit anticlimactic, but I guess it's okay. There's just one thing bugging me still.
She got up out of her bed and quietly took the syringe from her bag. She then approached the door, where she silently removed the chair and opened the door. After she left her room, she looked around her surroundings and focused on listening in on the environment as she made her way to the library. As she walked to the library, she could hear the creaking of old pipes and the soft ticking of the grandfather clock echoed throughout the manor. Upon arriving at the library, she looked around and found a door leading to a study room. She entered the study room and walked to a nearby shelf, where a small microscope was sitting. It was covered with dust, but seemed to still function properly. So after dusting it, she placed it on the desk and dropped a few drops of the water from the syringe into the petri dish. She then looked into the microscope and gasped.
There's bacteria in here. More than that, this is bacteria that is only found in ocean water, which raises the question of how it got here when Seabunnies in the middle of Usachi's done.
She then put away the microscope and began making her way back to her room, when she remembered the book she had seen earlier and made a detour to the first floor bookshelves. She ran her eyes across each row and finally recognized a few titles that she remembered being near the book she had seen. However, as she was scanning the row, she noticed a small but equal space between each book. She continued looking over the row, but found nothing, and that's when the spacing of the books began to make sense.
Whoever took the book made a great deal of effort to make sure its disappearance wasn't noticed.
She began to feel sleepy and decided to return to her room, now that she had at least confirmed what was in the syringe, and was able to internally narrow down where it could have possibly come from. Suddenly, she heard this faint sound of footsteps, At first she thought she was just hearing her own footsteps, and so she walked slower and minimized the sound that she made. However, she still heard a set of footsteps attempting to walk in sync with her, in an almost childlike manner. Bonini turned her head, but only darkness met her vision. She stopped for a moment and listened. There was nothing but silence, and so she began walking again. Once more she heard footsteps and quickened her pace. The footsteps grew closer and louder before disappearing into the darkness. She quickly closed and locked her door. She then placed a chair under the handle and looked around her room.
Although the footsteps are gone, I don't trust that the source of them has disappeared as well. I better stay up until morning to make sure that the source doesn't find its way in here. One thing is for certain. Somebody knows I was out there.
Bonini sat down at her desk and reviewed the deaths of Stronigan, Bunner, and Isaac. With the discovery of what the liquid in the syringe is,
If salt water was injected into their veins, then Stronigan and Bunner must have died from hemolysis, but that doesn't explain how Bennington died.
she ran through the events of the first night and the sudden death of Isaac Bunnington as she began rationalizing how Bunnington had been killed. Suddenly, she had an epiphany and stood up. As she stood up, she felt dizzy, and out of the corner of her eye, she saw the door to the wardrobe in her room had been open, and a dark figure loomed in the corner of her room. She tried to balance herself by grabbing onto the desk, but her legs gave way, and she blacked out. Chapter 7. Strawthorne laid awake on his bed, quietly staring up at the ceiling. The clock in his room ticked away the seconds, minutes, and hours of the night, but to Strawthorne it all felt like the same moment passing by. He sat up and walked over to the desk in his room, where he opened up the drawer and pulled out a children's book. Strawthorne sat down at his desk and reached into his pocket, where he pulled out a family photo. In the picture, Strawthorne was holding a small girl on his shoulders, while holding one hand with a woman and the other with a small boy. He smiled sadly at the image and placed it down in front of him before taking a deep breath and opening up the book.
Hey there, Ann. How you been, Jacob? Your dad's been so busy recently, he hasn't been able to read you guys any stories. It must have been hard going to sleep these last few days without a story to listen to. But today you found this book in the library of this place, and I think you guys will like this story.
Strawthorne cleared his throat and began to read the story.
Okay. It begins with a young prince who was a rowdy kid and would always pick fights with his sister. The king would scold the young prince and punish him harshly for teasing his sister, but he failed to see that the young prince could only show his love for his sister by annoying her and teasing her. One day, the young prince had gone a little too far and had accidentally hurt his sister. The king was furious when he found out and sent the young prince away to live with his aunt, the Duchess.
What? That's not fair. He was just playing around.
That's what he gets for being mean to his sister. Now be quiet. I want to hear what happens next.
The young prince was treated terribly by the Duchess, who had been jealous of her younger brother, the king, because he had stolen the crown from her. The countess would dress the prince in rags and make him sleep in the barn with all the dirty farm animals. She would only let him eat his meals on the porch, and the only time he was allowed inside the main house was to shower and clean the house. Day in and day out, the young prince had been worked to the bone and fed only enough to keep him going the next day. Meanwhile, the young princess had started missing her older brother's antics and would ask to see him. However, whenever the young prince was brought up, the king would change the subject by talking about a new trip that he could take the princess on. The princess would continue to ask about the young prince before finally she grew tired and decided one night to sneak out of the castle. The young princess took one of her horses from the stable and rode out to the countryside to find her brother. When the princess got to the farm where her aunt lived, she didn't see the prince anywhere. She tied up her horse to the fence post and walked around looking for the prince. She passed by the barn door where a small boy covered in dirt, dressed in torn-up clothes, was sleeping in a pile of hay. The princess looked closer at the boy and gasped as she realized it was her older brother. She quickly ran back to her horse and untied it before riding back to the castle at full speed to tell her father. Once she returned to the castle, she ran up to the king's room and shook him awake. She told the king about what she saw, but the king didn't believe her and instead was angry at the princess for sneaking out at night. The princess cried and begged her father to at least visit the prince to check on him, and the king reluctantly agreed. The next day, the king sent a messenger to his older sister to let him know that he was going to be checking up on the prince, and so the duchess quickly washed up the former prince and dressed him up in the fanciest clothes. She adorned him with the finest jewelry in her collection and threatened him to not say a single word about how he was being treated to the king. The young prince frightfully complied, and soon the king arrived at the duchess' house.
What a sneaky lady! That's not right at all. The princess has to tell his dad that evil duchess has been doing to him.
Annie's right. She can't just pretend that she's been nice to the prince when she hasn't been. Doesn't she know lying is really bad? And her dad will hit her if she lies. Strawthorn paused for a moment as a hint of guilt flashes across his face.
The king has a grand feast at the duchess' house, and they caught up on the many years they hadn't seen each other. The duchess lied to the king about all the fun the young prince was having, and how out here in the farm all his excess energy was easily dealt with by playing with all the animals and running around the pretty green pasture. The young prince bit his lip as he wanted to tell his father what was really going on, but any time he looked like he was about to intervene, the duchess would shoot him a warning glare and painfully pinch his leg. The princess tried to help her older brother, but it was in vain, and as the night came to an end, the king decided that the young prince would be better off staying out here in the farm, where he could study and use his energy freely, instead of keeping him holed up in his room in the castle, where he would only cause trouble by teasing his sister. The king then set off to the castle, with the princess and the younger prince once again remained at the farm. Days turned to weeks, and weeks into months, as the young prince had to deal with his aunt's terrible treatment all day, every day. After dinner, the princess would visit her brother secretly at night, and they would talk about getting the prince out of there. But one night, the princess was caught sneaking out, and her horse was taken away and sent to a racing circuit in the far west.
That's so sad. I really hate this evil duchess.
Yeah, that's totally not cool. But the princess is really brave for sneaking out in the dark, where there could be wolves and bears, just to cheer her brother up. Strawthorn smiled faintly as he flipped the page and continued reading.
With his sister now banned from visiting him, the young prince fell into despair as he continued to be worked hard every day. Finally, one night, as the young prince was crying on the haystack, a small fairy came down from the moon. Little prince, why do you cry so bitterly? The young prince was shocked to see a moon fairy, but considered it a small blessing from his sister. Oh, great moon fairy, I cannot possibly deal with my evil aunt anymore. My hands are cut up and bloody from fixing the cow fence. My clothes is dirty and stinky from cleaning out the pig pen. My hair is more tangled and ugly than the nest of a vulture. Why, oh why, great moon fairy, must I continue to live this way? I'm not even allowed the comfort of seeing my sister anymore. Poor prince, my heart weeps for your tragic situation. Do you wish to be free from this place? Oh, great moon fairy, please, I wish for it more than anything else in this world. I wish I could apologize to my sister for hurting her that day. I wish I could apologize to my father for causing him so much trouble. But more than that, I wish to be free. Please, take me up to the moon with you, great fairy. Are you sure that is what you want, little prince? Even if it means that you will never see your sister or father again? The young prince nodded and stretched out his arms to the moon fairy. Very well, little prince. However, I do not have the strength to carry you up to the moon. Instead, I will bestow upon you the sacred rope, which I will bring up with me and tie around the moon. When the rope stretches tight, jump with all your might and reach for the moon. I will have all the fairies of the moon pull you up, and you can be free from this evil place that you have found yourself in.
So the prince is finally free? Will he turn into a moon fairy too, or will he be the only human up there?
Why would he leave his sister all alone on Earth, though? What about when she grows up and gets her own horse? Then she can save her brother and bring him back to the castle.
Sometimes when people find themselves in really bad places, like an evil Duchess farm, they will only think about how bad today is and how wonderful yesterday was, because they cannot see how beautiful the future is.
That's terrible. I really hope that prince can find a way to come back to Earth later.
The moon fairy flew up faster than a lightning bolt and tied a big knot around the moon. The fairy then gave the signal, and the young prince jumped as high as he could and grabbed onto the magic rope, where the moon fairies pulled together with all their might until the young prince made it safely on the moon. The young prince looked down on the world and saw that his little sister had bought herself a new horse and was riding to the farm to see her brother once more. The princess arrived at the farm that night and went to the barn. She peeked inside and saw that the prince was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was a short note that told the princess not to worry, because he was free now and living on the moon with the great moon fairies. The princess was overcome with sadness and rode back to the castle, where she cried bitterly on her bed.
Strawthorn's voice begins to shake.
The princess prayed to the moon fairies and asked them to let her brother come back down to the world. However, her prayers went unanswered for many moons, until one night a moon fairy floated down onto her windowsill. Little princess, why do you pray so fervently to return your brother to this world that has only done wrong to him? Please, great moon fairy, my brother did not get a chance to see how beautiful the sea is on the other side of the mountain. He is yet to see how beautiful the forest is in the springtime. It is not fair to show him only the cold winter and take him away to a fall summer. If you cannot bring him back, then please take me to him. Very well, dear princess, you speak the truth. The prince could only see the winter, but he is happy here on the moon and does not wish to return. However, I can reunite you with him, and you two can play among the beautiful fields on the far side of the moon. Take these magic wings, and when the full moon shines, you must jump with all your might, and the wings will let you soar up to the moon, where you could find your brother once again.
A few tears pulled up in Strawthorn's eyes as he flipped to the next page.
And so on the night of the full moon, the princess wore her lunar wings and jumped as high as she could. At first, the wings shook a little and she fell, but she pictured her older brother waiting for her on the moon, and she began to soar to the moon. Finally, after witnessing many wondrous sights, she watched the world disappear from under her, and she landed on the moon with her brother. The two siblings finally reunited, and they ran off to play in the beautiful lunar fields past the west wind on the far side of the moon. The next day, the king woke up and could not find the princess anywhere. When he entered her room, he found a letter written to him, telling him once more of all the evil deeds of the Duchess and of her journey to the moon. The king was overcome with rage and sorrow as he realized his actions in the past were misguided. He took his fastest horse and rode off to the Duchess' house, where he struck down the Duchess and brought her before the gods at the end of the world for judgment. Many moons would pass once more, and at the end of the king's reign, a moon fairy came down from the heavens and brought him up to reunite with the prince and the princess. There, they continue to live happily ever after.
Strawthorn closed the book as a stream of tears quietly ran down his face. He took the picture and returned it to his pocket. At that moment, he heard a thump in the room next door, and quickly wiped his tears. He removed the chair from the handle and briskly walked to Dr. Bernini's room, where he softly knocked on the door. There was no answer. He knocked a little louder, yet he was only met with silence. Finally, he turned the knob to find it unlocked, cautiously entered the room, On the ground, he saw Dr. Bonini lying unnaturally, and he quickly ran up to her. He noticed she had stopped breathing, and he quickly turned around, only to be met with a mass of wood, and then nothingness. Chapter 8. Sir Foxy arose in the middle of the night and felt something amiss. The air felt a little heavier, and a slight metallic scent permeated the room. Outside, the wind howled and occasionally rattled the windows. Foxy got out of his bed and changed out of his pajamas. He then removed the chair from the door handle and slowly went out into the hallway. What should have been a pitch-black hallway was instead illuminated softly by the moonlight shining through an open door. Sir Foxy slowly approached the open door which belonged to Strawthorn's room, but it was completely empty inside. A quick search of the room turned up nothing particularly useful, other than the fact that the bed was still warm and dots of water were lining the wooden desktop. Sir Foxy left the room and looked around. He first returned to his room and did a thorough inspection, which produced nothing other than a guarantee that nobody was there. Next, Sir Foxy stood in front of Bunlock's room and pressed his ear against the door. The soft sound of Bunlock sleeping could be heard, and so Sir Foxy left and went across the hallway to the last room where Dr. Bonini should be. He placed his ear against the door and heard nothing at all, so he grabbed the knob and turned it to see if the room was open. Sure enough, as soon as he turned the knob and gave the door a little push, it creaked open. Sir Foxy cautiously stepped into the room and froze as he saw two bodies lying on the ground. One appeared to be in a peaceful slumber, while the other was bleeding profusely from its head. Sir Foxy immediately began searching the room and found what appeared to be the notes of Dr. Bonini.
I was able to confirm that the substance in the syringe is salt water from the ocean. The bacteria inside of it is likely what caused the death of both Bunner and Stronican. However, this does not explain the death of Bunnington. I suspect that some combination of the salt water and some other chemical caused a rapid onset of anemia, and that caused Bunnington to collapse and die so rapidly. I believe that the culprit is onto me, and so I will not have the time to find out what that unknown chemical is. I can guarantee, staking my title as a doctor, my pride as a scientist, that the bacteria that I found in the saltwater sample came from the southwestern region due to the shape of the bacteria, and the death of the bacteria when exposed briefly to the cold. I hope that this letter can aid the one who finds me, or at the very least that it can help the police in their investigation when they finally come.
The slight sound of someone shuffling their feet alerted Sir Foxy, and he turned around just in time to see a dark figure swinging something at him. He quickly evaded the swing and landed a punch across the figure's head. The figure made a soft pained noise and began running away. Sir Foxy ran after it and reached for its clothes, but missed it by a millimeter. The figure ran down the stairs and skipped half the flight by jumping down it, but Sir Foxy kept up with it enough to not lose sight. The figure ran towards the basement door, where it tried to open it, but failed due to it being locked, and seemed to panic as it ran into the dining hall. Sir Foxy gave chase to it and ran into the dining hall, where he heard glass breaking and saw the figure steal the silver box where the two master keys had been placed. Sir Foxy sprinted towards the figure as it fumbled with the box and dropped it, but not without first grabbing hold of a master key and running away again. The figure ran towards where Bunnington's body was resting, and Sir Foxy continued after it with a bit of relief, as he knew this hallway was a dead end except for the room where Bunnington was lying. Sir Foxy gave one last burst of energy and turned the corner where he saw the figure and charged at it. However, at the very last moment, the figure fainted Sir Foxy, and he stumbled before crashing into the wall. The figure took this opportunity to run back down the hallway. As Sir Foxy recovered and silently cursed the figure while returning to his pursuit of it, he saw the figure unlock the door to the stairwell leading down to the pantry, and Sir Foxy chased after it. The stairway spiraled down into what felt like a bottomless void, but Sir Foxy tore down it as he recognized his only chance to catch the killer was now, and he could not let that chance slip by his fingers. Sir Foxy reached the bottom of the stairs, where he looked around the pantry and saw the light of the freezer on. Sir Foxy grabbed a knife from the counter and approached the freezer. Just as he was about to step into the freezer, he stopped and spun around, where he caught the dark figure emerging from the shadows and approaching the figure to lock him in. The figure noticed that it had been found out and instantly changed tactic to running up the stairs. Sir Foxy was enraged at what felt like a high-stakes game of tag, as he vaulted over the countertops, knocking the contents off in the process. while speeding after the figure, which had now already gotten halfway up the stairwell. In an effort to at least not lose sight of this target, Sir Foxy blitzed up the stairs as he skipped 2 steps at a time, allowing him to ascend at an almost inhuman pace. Sir Foxy picked up a significant amount of momentum and ascended the final half of the stairs, skipping 3 steps at a time as he caught a glimpse of the figure slamming the door and locking it before running to the right. Instead of slowing down to avoid crashing into the door, Sir Foxy increased his pace even further as he reached an incredible speed and launched his body at the door with all the momentum he had gathered. The force of Sir Foxy's body slamming into the door was so great that it broke the door and flung it open so fast it flew off its hinges and landed on the floor. Sir Foxy gripped his shoulder as he felt a sharp pain erupt and spread throughout it. Even without any medical knowledge, he could sense that he would be lucky if the bone was only broken. He winced as he felt his shattered shoulder move slightly, and he looked up to see the figure entering the boiler room. Instantly, Sir Foxy's pain was replaced with a reignited rage as he chased after the figure. Sir Foxy kicked open the door to the boiler room and saw the figure in the corner moving some boxes where it seemed a small vent was.
Where do you think you're running off to, you cowardly, wretched mutt? Do you realize who it is that you're running from? Your cheap tricks and dirty tactics won't work against the likes of me.
The figure scrambled to move the boxes out of the way as Sir Foxy slowly approached it. Sir Foxy grabbed a nearby coal sack and placed a piece of coal in it before he spun the bag and slung the piece of coal, launching it at a great speed towards the figure. The figure was knocked back by the coal hitting it, and it dropped to the ground. Sir Foxy closed in on it and stopped right in front of the incinerator, where he reached in and grabbed a few hot coals with the bag and dragged the bag across the floor.
There's nowhere left for you to run off to, you filthy dingo. This is the end of the line for you, and it's a fitting place to end your pitiful existence. Although I suppose that would be an insult to this room, because not even the soot on the bottom of the oats boiler here is darker than your soul, and the flames of the incinerator would almost be too good of a reward for you to die in. You, who has taken the life of the only person I ever saw as my equal, do not deserve the honor of dying in the same state that he did. You, who has insulted my intelligence by thinking I wouldn't notice your pathetic attempt at the only thing you are good at, a sneak attack. You spineless wretch, who now lies knocked down before me, has not even earned the right to gaze upon me, let alone the privilege of dying by my hand. Seeing as you love to play judge, jury, and executioner, I will bestow upon you 3 punishments for the aforementioned sins you have committed against me. For the pain you have inflicted upon me, I will use this hot coals to give you a preview of a fraction of the fires of hell that will soon burn your soul. For the death of my one and only friend, I will drag you down to the freezer where you can feel the same cold, empty room that you took his precious life in. Finally, for your pride at assuming that I would even entertain the idea of ending you with my hands, I will end your disgusting existence by breaking your kneecaps and chawing your hands in the incinerator over dragging your worthless, pathetic, nauseating existence out into the blizzard where the wolves can feast on your insides while you still breathe.
The figure slowly rose to its feet as Sir Foxy approached it with a bag of red-hot coals. Sir Foxy spun the bag around, allowing it to gain momentum at such an incredible speed that the coals began burning even hotter from the combined friction of the air rushing past it and the other coals rubbing against one another. Just as Sir Foxy was about to release the bag, the figure stood up and hurled the piece of coal it had been hit with, causing Sir Foxy to use the bag he was winding up to knock it away. However, the momentum of the bag was so great that it tore open as Sir Foxy swung it to the side, which caused the hot coals in it to fly off to the side and smash against the nearest boiler. Pieces of red-hot coal chunks flew everywhere, and a few sliced into Sir Foxy. He stumbled backwards in pain as a shard of coal embedded itself into his broken shoulder. The figure took this moment to lug a half-empty crate of coal at Sir Foxy, which took him down to the ground. Once Sir Foxy slammed into the ground, the figure stepped forward and twisted its body, using both the torsion of its torso and the strength in its outstretched leg to chuck a piece of coal at Sir Foxy's head so hard that it knocked him out. The figure then stumbled up to Sir Foxy and pulled out a small blade from a necklace it was wearing that it used to end Sir Foxy's life. Chapter 9. Bunlock slowly stirred from his rest as the soft rays of the sun pierced the clouds and beautiful white snowflakes softly floated down to the ground. He stretched his arms and got out of bed. The warmth of the room seemed to cling to him as he removed the chair from under his doorknob. He opened the door and was immediately assaulted by the metallic scent of blood in the air, and the sight of Strawthorn and Dr. Bonini's lifeless bodies across the hall. Bunlock stared silently at the impossible scene before him before he regained his wits and ran over to Bonini's room. On the floor he saw 2 scraps of paper.
Countess Strabinicus found bludgeoned on her farm. Early this morning, the milkman discovered the brutalized corpse of Countess Strabinicus, but no weapon was found at or around the scene of the crime. A pair of ladies returning home late last night from Countess Strabinicus's farm said they saw her younger brother entering the farm. However, authorities have been unable to find Sundown Strawthorn and instead found his house burnt to the ground. Out of all the ones I've found, this is probably the worst. It's almost inconceivable to think a quiet man like Strawthorn would do something of this caliber.
Bunlock then read the next newspaper clipping.
Local clinic shut down after nurses find the body of the director. The opening shift of nurses discovered the body of director Yuketa Anna Owen. They immediately contacted police, and after the crime scene was investigated, they helped to find the cause of death. The nurses found an unnatural lack of red blood cells in the director's body despite no open wounds. They consulted a close friend of the director's, Chunyao Bonini, and it was discovered that the director had suffered a bout of severe anemia and died as a result. A few months later, the case was revisited after an autopsy was conducted and Chunyao Bonini was called to court. However, she had disappeared shortly after giving her consultation. Now a collection of eyewitness testimonies and new evidence has placed Dr. Bonini as the lead suspect in the case.
Bunlock looked down to the floor where the syringe he had her analyzing was smashed up. Bunlock then left the room and went to check up on Sir Foxy when he noticed his door was also open, but the room was empty. Bunlock wandered around the estate as the sun shone through the windows, creating an ironically peaceful and pleasant setting. He checked the dining hall first, but it was empty. Then the first floor rooms, they were all empty as well, save for the one Bennington was laid in to rest. He noticed the door leading to the pantry was completely torn off the hinges, and he carefully descended into the pantry, where he found a mess of food, drink, and ingredients all over the floor. However, there was no sign of Sir Foxy being present. Finally, he checked the boiler room, where he found Sir Foxy lying in a pool of drying blood. He had scrapes all over his face and arms, and a piece of coal was embedded in his shoulder. What had finished him off was a small incision into his jugular. Bunlock stood in partial disbelief and a strange sense of relief that it was all over. On the corner of the nearest boiler was yet another newspaper clipping.
Nation in mourning as Grand Duke Univik Golden Bun is found dead. This morning, the head servant of the Golden Bun estate discovered his master had passed away in his sleep. The police investigated the scene but found no evidence of foul play and have deemed it a natural death. A messenger was sent to his son, Sir Foxy Unalicious Golden Bun, Esquire III, but he was not at home. Locals say they saw him leave last night in his father's car, which has since been found abandoned at a local mall.
As Bunlock turned to leave, he noticed another paper on the floor.
Police headquarters receives written confession from the killer of Grand Duke Univich Golden Bun. An independent investigative reporter recently discovered that the Usachi Stan police had received a confession from Sir Foxy Unalicious Golden Bun, Esquire III, detailing the killing of his father by his hands. Upon hearing the news, our glorious leader, Usachi Yui herself, announced an internal investigation into corruption in the Usachi Stan Central Police.
Bunlock walked back to his room, where he sat down at his desk and gathered all the newspaper clippings he had collected across the days. He arranged them in the order that he found them in and began to think about all the deaths that occurred over the last few days. He stared blankly at the newspaper clippings and sighed heavily, accidentally causing one of the clippings to fall onto the ground. Bunlock reached down to pick up the newspaper clipping and noticed that it was flipped upside down and had some writing on it. He immediately flipped all the other clippings around and stared in awe at this new discovery. He lined them all up in order of acquisition and froze for a second.
Wait, no, this is absolutely insane. But it also makes so much sense. Okay, the first death was a mixture of salt water and lead. According to the notes left by Dr. Benini and that textbook I looked in, those two together can cause a severe anemic effect. Following that, Bunner was killed in a similar manner, but it seems like just salt water was used. That means that the culprit only had a limited amount of lead on hand. It looks like Strakowski was led into a room via a cassette player that had recordings of my voice and then suffocated. I'm a little hurt that he thought that I had anything to do with the first two deaths, but I also can't help but admire that he was able to catch on to foul play as early as then. Benedict was killed via a tripwire system of sorts. It looks like someone dragged him to the very back of the freezer to lure more people in. Strachan was found in the same room that Benedict was found in, but it was after he had already split up with Sir Foxy. Strachan was then found dead in his bed and a syringe left there with him. I believe that by that point, the killer had been taunting us. And I can say for certain that Strachan died the same way that Bunner did. Finally are the three deaths that occurred last night. First, Benini was killed because she was the first to leave her room. I'm not sure why, but maybe she had an epiphany of her own. Just with more unfortunate timing. I imagine that the killer followed her, and once they discovered that she had figured out the contents of the syringe, they hid in her room and then watched her work a little longer and killed her with the very syringe that she had been studying. Then the killer intentionally dropped Benini's body to alert Strawthorne, and then ambushed and killed him. They continued to hide in Benini's room, and it seems as though Sir Foxy woke up at some point and noticed that something was off. From there, I can only assume that a chase ensued after a failed attempt on Sir Foxy's life, though it ultimately culminated in the death of Sir Foxy in the boiler. And with all of this evidence laid out, there is only one, a single irrefutable truth, a certainty most foul and concrete. Only one twisted individual could have possibly done this. And that person...
He trails off, walking out the door, holding for dramatic effect. He jumped up in excitement as everything began clicking in his head, and he quickly ran down the hallway. He reached the stairs and began running down when he misplaced his footing and lost balance.
What? Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
In an instant, Bunlock tumbled down the last few steps and landed on the ground head first as a terrible cracking sound rang out through the halls, signifying the end. Epilogue. My life has been one of shame. At a young age, I understood that I wouldn't amount to much. My grades were average, my dreams were average, my friends were average, and my parents? Well, I never really knew them. I still distinctly remember the very first day I saw death. I had run off into the forest with my friends when I accidentally strayed too far off the trail and had gotten lost. I was terrified and wandered around aimlessly before I stumbled upon a cottage. The cottage had no lights on, and it was eerily quiet. At first, I thought it had been abandoned, but as I looked around the cottage for a bathroom, I saw the remains of a lost soul who had given up hope. I wasn't put off by the stench of death or by the grisly sight that lay before me. Instead, I felt a profound sense of pity for the man, and it was that pity and sorrow that stayed with me all my life. I found a map in the cottage and was able to safely return to my town, where I went to the orphanage I grew up in and decided to talk to the head sister about what I had seen. The head sister was a beautiful lady who had the kindest smile and a truly wonderful personality. Whenever the other kids at the Whenever the other kids at the orphanage would bully me, she would always cheer me up and punish the bullies. When I told my tale to the head sister, she had a concerned expression on her face, and before asking why I was in the forest or why I had run off the trail, she made sure that I was feeling okay. I told her how I felt when I saw the body, and she seemed to understand. She then recommended I come to a study group that she led with her fellow sisters, and that was how I came to discover Yuiism. Oh, how wonderful the light of our great leader is! I felt a profound connection to the teachings passed down by our great leader, and admired her bravery and selflessness. I read all the tales of her great victories in the Revolution and the Great War, as well as her reconstruction efforts in Straubania, and all across Usachistan that led it to become the glorious nation it is now. However, our great leader is only one person, and even among the honorable straw bunnies lie cowards who ran away from the scales of justice. And so I devised a plan to invite the 9 other guests to Eunich Norman's estate, which I had secretly acquired through a connection I had in the church. I found my targets and sent out letters posing as her victims to lure them in. I made sure to set the date for the middle of February, when the chance for a snowstorm still remains high, but not high enough to warrant preparing for one. In this sense, I like to think our great leader lent me a bit of her luck to seal those evildoers in here, which allowed me to carry out my plan without interruption. Then I carried out my plan. I'm sure at this point the specifics of the manner of each person's death has probably been explained by that dastardly detective, so I won't bore you with a recap. Instead, I'll go over the final piece of the puzzle that's missing, the howdunit. Starting with Isaac Bunnington. After having Stronican set off the cassette player with the accusations, I laced the only bottle of whiskey that was there with potassium cyanide. In this sense, Bunnington was partially unlucky to have taken that specific bottle, or so I would like to say. During dinner, I had poured him whiskey from that bottle multiple times and praised the flavor, which gave him a sense of familiarity and comfort with it. Then I left it on top of the bar's countertop, where I knew he would go to, under duress. Then I laced the drink and waited. Once we arrived at the kitchen and Isaac read the clipping I had planted, it was just a matter of waiting for his body to give up. Next was Ulivian Bunner. Although he has retired, I could not let a former Bun Bud commander roam the streets freely, especially after reading what he did to his fellow comrade. I understand not all Bun Buds are bad, but anyone who betrays their brethren and disrespects the sanctity of life cannot be allowed to go unpunished. After Bunner went to bed that night, I entered his room using one of the master keys and simply injected him with seawater. Kaz Strakowski was a bit trickier. Quite frankly, I was not expecting him to catch on to foul play so quickly, but I'm glad that he decided to target his suspicion at Bunlock. I tailed Strakowski and recorded snippets of Bunlock's voice, which I then used to lure him into the closest first-floor room I could find, with a large wardrobe. After luring him in, I was planning on sneaking up on him, but it seems he noticed something was off and almost made it out of the room. Thankfully, I was able to stun him with the lights and then suffocate him. Then it was Kenryu Benedict. He was a promising young chef, but it was through his food that he allowed his partner in crime, Stronican, to kill their former master. As I was ascending with Sir Foxy, I told him I had dropped something and to walk a little ahead of me, where I then placed the key off to the side of the stairwell and set up a small tripwire. Once I heard Bunnington fall down the stairs, we both ran down to check on him, and since he took the tripwire down with him on his fall, I didn't need to worry about it. It's here where I must admit a bit of deception was used. Benedict was lying where he died at the foot of the stairs, and Sir Foxy and I simply carried him up the stairs. Next was the most difficult to set up. Before any of this was set into motion, I had a body double of me created for what I said was going to be a promotional video for the church, that I needed a body double to do a stunt. I brought this body double and dressed it up in an extra pair of clothes I had in my closet, and then froze it down in the freezer. Then I simply lured in Strawthorn, Bunlock, and Sir Foxy, who could all act as witnesses for each other, but also could equally share the suspicion from the remaining guests. And then they brought my body double up to the surface. Stronican was easy to deal with, as I merely dressed up like the lost son of his former master's family, and used the pendant that Benedict had conveniently found to convince him that this was all a revenge scheme to get back at him. Finally, we have the 4 remaining guests. For Dr. Bonini, I simply hid in her room and struck when the time was right. Then I made enough noise to alert Strawthorn, who was in the room next door, and struck him across the head with a wooden chair leg. However, this is where my luck ran out a bit, as I was planning on sneaking into Sir Foxy's room and poisoning him as well, but it seems like he woke up and unexpectedly chose to leave his room. My luck further ran out when he sensed my sneak attack and managed to land a hit on me. I then had to lead him on a wild goose chase, and he nearly got me there at the end. If he hadn't thrown that piece of coal at me, I would have seriously been screwed. At last, there's Bunlock Watcher. Going into this, I believed he would be my greatest threat, and so that's why I left newspaper clippings around the crime scenes to lead him on a meaningless hunt, and also to provide enough context to let him slowly figure it out. I wasn't counting on him being so clumsy, though. You're wondering what he did that got him selected as one of my targets? Well, he was tied to that massive corruption case, and was also the one assigned to each of the other members' cases. In fact, the reason everyone conveniently disappeared was due to his interference. Well, with that said, it's time for me to take my leave. By the time this has been read, the police will have found me dead in my guest room. I do not intend to go on living, now that I myself have become the very people I hunted. I understand that my pursuit of personal justice does not give me the right to take the lives of others, but I feel the world as a whole would be better off with less murderers running around the streets. I'm not one for goodbyes, but this time it's truly the end of my act, and I must walk off the stage that we call life. Farewell!